Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be able to connect again today. We had a couple of weeks off since our last connection, and um, I certainly, even though I don't connect in person, I can honestly say I certainly missed you. I missed the energy we get to share together in this meeting. Um, in a way, this talk today, day 31, ideas planted in the heart and held in the mind, is about connection between others, the other people, whether they're on the Tao path or some other. It really is about connection, regardless of what our destinies are, which of course are somewhat unique to all of us. One thing they have in common is whatever your destiny has to do with, you can almost guarantee that to do it well, it will involve connection. And that really is what this talk is about. Hopefully I can do it as well as Bill just did the talk he gave, because that talk really spoke to me and was wonderful. And I'm sure you all feel the same. The thing I'm going to talk about here is obviously day 31 of the Tao of Joy. And one of the points that Derek makes in this book, I'm going to talk a little bit about chapter 54 and what it means on, say, I'm going to try to say this way, what it means on a deep level. But to do that, I'm going to point something out, and that's that the deepness really is everywhere, because the Tao is everywhere. So to connect with some people, with anyone rather, to connect with anyone, if you can connect with them in a deep way, that's better. And, oddly enough, it doesn't even have to be what you say. One of the examples that I really liked that Bill gave was sometimes helping with someone is just a hug, a well-placed hug at the right moment. Doesn't involve saying anything, and yet that connection can be so strong. So planted in the heart and held in the mind, of course, is the subtitle that you see there on the title slide. And interesting thing, one of the things Derek points out is that what this chapter talks about is not physical or material. And yet, for those of you who have read the chapter, I'm going to do something interesting here. I'm going to talk about something a little physical for a moment. And that would first be the heart. So, interesting thing about the heart physically, it's the most rhythmic organ in our body. And it has to work and beat every moment that we're alive. And yet, it never gets tired where it needs a break, where it needs to stop. And it reminds me so much of the Tao. If you think of a Tao, of the cup of water, where you pour the water in forever and it never overflows. It just has a limitless capacity to it. In many ways, in the context of living in time and space, the heart is much the same way. And so the heart and the mind definitely come into this presentation today. So let me go ahead and jump into the meat of it, so to speak. So as I said, I'm going to be bringing up Tao Te Ching chapter 54, a couple of excerpts from it, which go as follows. That which is well established cannot be uprooted. That which is strongly held cannot be taken. So it's an interesting turn of phrase that Lao Tzu has put in here. And what I put on the title here is, well, let's consider the implications of that first, because Derek does such a wonderful job of pointing that out in this chapter. Notice that these two lines from the Tao Te Ching cannot be referring to anything in the physical realm. This must be so. Why? Well, because we all recognize that anything physical, no matter how well established, can be uprooted. when a sufficient amount of force is applied. I mean, if you think about your heart, it's firmly rooted in your body, but a sufficient amount of force one day will make it stop, even if it's its own force doing what it's exactly meant to do. Sooner or later, our hearts will stop. But that's not really the heart that Derek's talking about. Similarly, no matter how hard one holds on to something, it can always be taken away. And think about how true that is. You know, the story that I'll share with you that I always think of when I hear this sentiment expressed is one that has to do with my father. Now, in retrospect, I love my father, and love is limitless, love is forgiving, love is understanding. But our relationship back when I didn't know much about love was difficult. And one of the reasons it was difficult is an example I'm going to give you. My father had a 63 light beige Impala, and boy, he loved that car. He really loved it. In a way that was, frankly, in retrospect, was unhealthy. And he held on to it as tightly as he could, but that didn't stop it from being stolen. And when I read this chapter, I thought of that because it's one of the things that comes up. Okay, so because those things aren't physical, they're not material, therefore we realize the fact that the reference has to do with the realm of ideas. The ideas that are eternal. Now, in the chapter, Derek goes on to explain how, as an example, he talks about how buildings can be destroyed, but because the idea of a building lives on, it can always be rebuilt. As long as human beings pass down their ideas about how buildings are made, the realities that stem from those ideas can be manifested again and again ad infinitum. And it's funny, too, that he gave this example of buildings, and I'm sure probably most of us are aware. Today is the 9th, and in 2 days it will be Tuesday, 9/11. And I don't think any of us can live that day without remembering a different Tuesday. Any of us who lived through that, anyways. And yes, those buildings are gone. And in fact, they weren't rebuilt in their exact form, but they could have been, because of the idea that goes on as long as humans are there. And it doesn't even have to be humans, really. Just any being, intelligent being, who can, in fact, share and connect. So, and excuse me, by the way, let me say in advance, excuse me if I sniffle or cough here a little bit. I'm getting over a cold, so I apologize for that, if that's a distraction. So Derek goes on in this chapter to talk about planting the tree of wisdom in the heart while holding on to the idea of Tao cultivation in the mind. And in thinking about this, I began to think about how body, mind, and spirit are all connected. A few weeks ago, Bill talked about this a little bit. He touched on it after a presentation. And it is so true. And even though, of course, body and possibly even mind certainly has physical components to it, and it is connected, but it's connected to other things that are not physical. And those are the things that endure. Wisdom endures. Ideas of Tao cultivation, ideas of the teachings, the idea of putting the teachings together and making them part of your life, those are the things that are forever. Lifetime after lifetime, destiny after destiny. And connection goes on and on and on. Now, also the other thing that came across to me as I was reading this chapter was the famous Head and Heart letter of Thomas Jefferson. And the reason why I put Mount Rushmore up here is because Thomas Jefferson, of course, is one of the two founding fathers on that memorial. He's the one next to Washington. And between Washington and Teddy Roosevelt, with Lincoln off, looking in the other direction. He's the founding father who, of course, he wrote the Declaration of Independence. And his ideas and his wonderful rhetoric, if I could use that term, is sort of the governing principle of our country. And it's a good thing. And it's good even if Mr. Jefferson didn't always live up to it fully. But he still gave us such wonderful rhetoric to work towards. Rhetoric isn't necessarily a bad thing. It often has a negative context. But it doesn't have to. And so in reading this letter, I thought of the Heart and Head letters, and I'm going to go into it just briefly, if I can. And I'll share some excerpts from it as well. If hopefully none of you will mind. Hopefully you'll enjoy these letters as much as, or that letter as much as I do. But in 1786, Jefferson was serving as minister to France, and he had lost his wife, I think about 4 years earlier. And so he was, much of the way Jefferson dealt with his grief was he sort of retreated into his head. By the way, that's something that a lot of people do, regardless of grief from loss or just pain for any other reason. Many of us, I know me, I can say I spent some time in this, retreated into my head, disconnected from my body, so to speak, lived in my head. Well, but you can't really disconnect from your body, and your body will cry out when you do, and you won't even notice, sometimes until it's too late. But, thanks to the Tao teachings and developing awareness, working on state control and calmness, it allows you to fully connect with yourself first, and then with others, because of oneness, really. But getting on to the Heart and Head letter, so Jefferson finds himself in France, and he meets a woman named Maria Causeway, who's an artist, and she's Catholic, and she's married. So, in Jefferson's time, that basically meant there was not going to be any romance. But he fell in love with her nonetheless. And I think, in reality, it was nothing more than a platonic friendship. And he shared about a month where he spent quite a bit of time with her. But he definitely fell head over heels in love with her. And it created a crisis for him between what's in his heart and what's in his mind. And I think these letters really sort of typify the point made about ideas and the reasons for living, which live in the heart. So I'm going to share some excerpts, like I said. So this is how the letter starts. Madam, seated by my fireside, solitary and sad, the following dialogue took place between my head and my heart. Head, well, friend, you seem to be in a pretty trim. Heart, I am indeed the most wretched of all earthly beings, overwhelmed by grief. Head, this is one of the scrapes in which you are ever leading us. You must learn to look forward before you take a step that may interest our peace. Heart, let the gloomy monk, sequestered from the world, seek unsocial pleasures in the bottom of his cell. Have they ever felt the pleasure of one generous spasm of the heart, they would exchange for it all the frigid speculations of their lives. Head, do not bite at the bait of pleasure until you know there is no hook beneath it. The art of life is the art of avoiding pain. Heart, leave me to decide when and where friendships are to be contracted. We have no rose without its thorn, no pleasure without alloy. Head, those which depend on ourselves are the only pleasures a wise man will count on, for nothing is ours for which another may deprive us of. So in those letters, the theme of this chapter just draws out to me, which is probably why it's, when I read the chapter the first time, I thought of the Heart and Head letters, and I certainly thought of it again as I reread it to put this presentation together. So much of it typifies what I think Derek stated so well in the chapter. In fact, there's one quote from someone who was in Ken Burns' documentary about Thomas Jefferson. They were speaking of the Heart and Head letters, and they threw in at the end of it, I think it was the last thing they put in, was a quote from the late Gore Vidal, where he said, and he of course is referring to Jefferson, I believe that in his case, the head absorbed the heart, and perhaps it is his great resonance today that along with the first-rate cortex, the heart was beating within his mind. And so much of it reminds me, so much of that quote reminds me of the Tao. The wisdom of it we hold in our hearts on a deep level that's physical, non-physical. It's the totality of it. And it beats within our mind. The things we choose to notice, the connections we share, the things worth living for, the things that regardless of our destinies are so important. The actual connection, the experience of living. The Tao is why we're here. We're here for each other. We're here to connect. And you know, the separation things, they really are an illusion. As Bill said, he was in a Christian environment and he fit in like a hand in a glove because, well, let's face it, Bill knows how to be calm. Bill knows how to manage his state. Bill knows how to be aware of what's going on, what's really going on. Bill knows how to connect. And of course, that comes from years of cultivation, years of following the teaching, years of being dedicated to it. And that's what I sincerely want to learn. And I hope that in the context that I put it in, maybe will be of some help to you in achieving that similar goal that I think we all notice that we want and share. So I'm going to start to sum it up. As I've gone a little over here, I apologize. Remember, chapter 54, that which is well established cannot be uprooted. That which is strongly held cannot be taken. Notice that this quote is referencing the realm of ideas, not the realm of the material world. When it comes to the Tao, plant the tree of wisdom in your heart and hold on to Tao cultivation in your mind. Think of the head and heart letters, and like Jefferson, let the heart of wisdom beat within your mind so that you can share the Tao with everyone as you move through this life, connecting with the people you care about, with the people you don't know yet but will know, with the people maybe you've known for lifetimes, and maybe you will know, and connect with for lifetimes more. You know, I don't know whether there's reincarnation or not. I can't prove it to you in a test tube. I believe it as a matter of faith. But I have this feeling that the people I love, Wendy, my children, even my first wife, my son who passed many years ago, Derek, Bill, my closest friends, and of course, Wendy, my soulmate, that we'll meet time and time again, lifetime after lifetime, connecting, fulfilling the destinies we're meant to fulfill. And the Tao is, I'm so glad that the Tao is such an integral part of that for me, and I'm sure for all of you as well. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak with you today. As always, I want to end with a book recommendation, The Tao of Joy Every Day, a great book to use daily to help one study and learn the Tao teachings and put them into action. Day 31, Ideas Planted in the Heart and Held in the Mind. Thank you all so much for listening to me. I hope I said something that was helpful, and I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday.
Alex, thank you so much for that. I love the mental imagery of, planting the tree of wisdom. And there's one aspect of it that I find especially fascinating, and that is when one plants a seed, we know that it's not going to change anyone overnight. It takes some time for the seed to sprout, and there is no. What is so fascinating to me is that there is no telling exactly when that's going to occur, and it may be quite a while before anything actually can be detected as a personal transformation. But I also know that there have been examples in my life when I have observed how once the seed has been planted, one day something happens, the circumstances are just right, there's a reminder, there's a nudge, there's some sort of a catalyzing effect, and then suddenly, there it is, the tree of wisdom, and it becomes the most important thing in a particular person's life. And that's truly a wonderful miracle to behold.